Hey guys, are you looking to get your own homestead or expand your existing homestead? Do you know what you don't know? As 2023, people continue to want to get away from the cities and get a homestead, provide for their own families, provide their own food, get into this lifestyle. And what I'm seeing pop up is tons and tons of questions about it. What occurs to me is there's a lot of things that people don't know that they don't know. And I think that's the worst part, is not knowing what you don't know that you need to know. And what I mean by that is when a lot of people start gardening or growing their own food, they know that they have to find out things they don't know about growing, like when to harvest. If you don't know that, you still know in your mind that you need to know, right? Whereas say you get cows and you have to get to know more about cows. Well, if you don't know that you have to trim their feet, it's something that might not come up at all in conversation or YouTube videos where, you're looking at basic health and care. It might not come up. I think the main point to homesteading is being able to grow and raise your own food. That's kind of the whole premise behind the lifestyle. And if you're not doing that, I think you almost have a hobby farm or a rescue farm. And let's face it, most of us can't afford a hobby farm in these times. Now, I think most people getting into homesteading probably have a good understanding of gardening. Otherwise, they might not want to get into it. And your own food production on the homestead starts with the seeds. So with the seeds is, what seeds do you need to buy for your zone, for your growing area? How long is your growing period? There's no point growing seeds that mature in 120 days if your growing season is 90 days. What type of garden do you have? What kind of food do you eat? There's no point growing food that you don't actually eat. Is there food you can store to be able to preserve it that much longer going into the winters? When to plant those seeds? Again, can you start them early? If you're in a short growing season, can you start them early and then transplant? Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to plant companions? So vegetables that grow together or don't like each other, so you can't plant them beside each other. There's all these different things that if you have gardened, you already know them. But again, if you don't garden, there's a lot of you might not know. Some things like when to harvest. Goes for almost everything, whether it be your vegetables, your fruits, your medicinal plants, your animals. How to preserve. Do you freeze them, dry them, dehydrate them? Are you going to can them? Are you going to make wine, jams, jellies, chutneys, preserves? And are you thinking that you know how to, or have you thought about collecting the seeds from all of those? So do you collect a lot of vegetables and then let some go to seed? Do you know how to store them? Do you know how to make sure the seeds are dry and keep them safe? Put them in like a nice cool area for the winter, for next season. Have you thought about all these factors that go into growing your own food? Did you know with a lot of these plants and vegetables and stuff as well, there's some versions that are perennials versus annuals. So for example, onions and shallots, you can get ones that just continue to grow and grow and grow. Garlic, you don't have to plant garlic. You can get different versions of garlic style plant. So it gives you the same taste as garlic, but you don't have to plant garlic every year. You can just have perennials. Are you going to grow fruit trees and bushes and shrubs and that sort of thing? And did you know about them? Do you know all the aspects of, say, propagating? So can you propagate from cuttings or from roots or air propagation or that sort of thing, where you don't have to go to the nursery all the time to get new plants? You get a few and then continue to propagate your own plants from those ones. And if you're doing that kind of thing, Do you actually like the food you're growing? Do you know about different versions of fruit? Do you know what they taste like? Do you know if you actually can preserve them for longer periods? Now, what about medicinal plants? Are you going to grow some medicinal plants? Have you thought about growing some medicinal plants on your homestead? Can you ID them? Can you forage for them? Can you buy them and plant them? Have you seen them at the local nursery? When do you harvest them? How do you propagate them? How do you save them and put them into tinctures and salves and that kind of stuff? How do you use them? Do you know when they go bad? There's so many things like that once you get into the medicinal plants. Again, the learning curve is steep, so you can't jump in totally and just start doing everything, because there's a lot of things that you'll miss and get overwhelmed with. But I guess even if you do jump in head first and just go nuts, there's good stuff about, say you don't harvest your medicinal plants one year, they'll just come back again. So for example, echinacea, if you don't harvest it, it's just going to expand even more, which is nice. And then once you learn how to harvest and preserve it, then you can go ahead and start harvesting it. And obviously, if you are getting a homestead, you're going to have animals. So do you know which ones you want to have on the homestead? Do you know how to look after them? Do you know how to care for them? Do you know how to feed them? Do you know what their requirements are? Do you have the right size area for them? Do you know how to breed them? Do you know how to incubate the eggs? Do you know how to look after health issues? Say they come down with some sickness, or, for example, a cow gets an abscess in one of its hoofs. Do you know what to look for? There's so many things that have this steep learning curve where, again, if you jump right in, there might be a lot of things you miss. And on the animal side too, there's a big thing about when do you harvest them? Can you harvest them? Do you know how to harvest them? Are you comfortable harvesting them? That's a big step right there, because again, if you're not comfortable harvesting an animal, suddenly you're going to get a hobby farm or an animal sanctuary, and if your entire purpose is to provide food for your family or save money, a hobby farm is not going to do it. And after you harvest the animal, do you know how to butcher it? Do you know how to store it before butchering it? Or are you going to take it to an abattoir or butcher and have them do everything for you? Do you know how to get that process going? Because there's no point getting animals and then having to find out, a couple months later that, oh, it's time to harvest them. Now you got to figure out how to harvest them. And then the animal gets too big. I'm thinking pigs off the top of my head. And then it gets worse and worse and worse for if you're going to harvest them or you're going to take them to the abattoir. Because sometimes the bigger they get, it's not good. They put on more fat, they cost you more food, and the payoff for getting the meat versus the weight is not ideal. You're wasting money, you're wasting food. Now, after you've butchered them or get them back from the butcher, how do you preserve them? Are you going to freeze it, can it, smoke it, drying it, make it into jerky, sausages? Like, what is your plan to preserve that food afterwards? Do you have enough space? Is there stuff you've thought of or haven't thought of? For example, say you want to do your own bacon and get some pork bellies back from the butcher, or you do it yourself and have those pork bellies. Now do you know how to brine it and smoke it and preserve it? If you are going to preserve it, or if you're just going to freeze it like I do. Do you know how to do that? Because otherwise those pork bellies are going to sit in your freezer for a while, or they're going to go to waste. Again, it's such a steep learning curve that if you haven't thought about, jumping in with both feet is okay, but there's a lot of problems it's going to cause you. Most of those problems are going to be your time, your money. And even though we've covered all of that with all the food and growing your own food and raising your own food, we haven't even talked about infrastructure. Do you know how to build fences? Do you know how to build raised beds? Can you build your own smoker if you want? How about a chicken coop? What about the pigs? Do you know how to keep them from getting out? What about meat chickens? What's the best way to do that? Have you looked into all these different aspects and researched it and found out different things about the animals that you're going to raise and about the infrastructure they need, about the costing, about where to get stuff? If you don't have somewhere close where, say, you can buy a water trough for your pigs or your cows, that causes more headaches down the long run, and it's things like that that should be taken care of ahead of time rather than jumping in and then finding out there's things you need going forward. So guys, I hope you like this video and it gives you some food for thought about things you might need to think about, things you might need to research if you're getting your own homestead or expanding a homestead to get more stuff. If you like this video, get down here and check this one out about reasons why your homestead might fail.